Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Big Fight. It's special because we are really taking a look at India's foreign policy and whether we've almost systematically got it wrong all of these years. Is India at risk? Has it been at risk? And what perhaps could be done? And by the way, we're also going to touch upon one of the big subjects that has been very much making the headlines all week long. And that's the entire question of, had the leadership been different just after independence, would life have been very different? If, for example, Sardar Patel had actually been India's first Prime Minister, would things have gone a different way? So we're going to touch upon that just a little bit as well as we go forward. But it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the program and into our studio Mr. Jaswant Singh, former Foreign Minister of India and the person who's just written India at Risk, which is out there, where he's made many of these themes. So it's great to have you with us. Randeep Singh Surjewala, Cabinet Minister in the Haryana government. It's wonderful to have you with us. Vivek Katju, former diplomat, has been really keeping a close view from inside and can perhaps tell us whether we've made a mess of things, as indeed will Dr Radha Kumar be able to tell us, who's a historian, author, columnist, interlocutor in Kashmir, a whole range of things. It's always a pleasure to have Mr. D. Raja with us, National Secretary of the Communist Party of India, and somebody else who's going to give us an insider's view into how the government's handled all of these, Dr. Sanjaya Baru, former media advisor to the Prime Minister and, of course, a leading journalist as well. So it's great to have all of you with us. It's a really, really high-powered panel to help us understand the broad sweep of history and what we could have done right and what we could have done wrong. Other people are going to join us as well, but for the moment, also joining us from Islamabad, it's a great pleasure to welcome Syed Tariq Pirzada, who's a strategic affairs expert who might be able to give us a bit of the Pakistani viewpoint of all that has happened. So why don't I start with you? The broad theme of what you've been saying is that we've often got it wrong. We've often done things which we've made mistakes. We've had misconceptions on how we should handle our security, and lots of misadventures as well. That's very clearly the sub-theme.
Yes, it is indeed, because this is an attempt at the kind of a political military analysis, not history, an analysis of the last 66 years of independent India. This book is, I think, the first attempt to travel this path along with independent India, from independence to as current a situation as we have today. It's to try and understand where we could have done things differently. And of course, it's with the benefit of hindsight. And it's obvious that hindsight is always 20/20. And so what we see as a mistake, in retrospect, sitting here today, in the heat of the situation and the immediacy of finding solutions, perhaps that didn't appear to be a mistake. We should approach this entire question with as much understanding and concern and an attempt to go to those situations so that we try and put across as rational a situation as possible.
By and large, has India been at risk? Have we by and large done things right, or could we have done things wrong? And as Mr. Jaswant Singh said, this is, of course, with the wisdom of hindsight. It was a mistake to have gone to the United Nations, right? Or partition itself, it was a mistake. Going to the United Nations, it was a mistake. Should we have been tougher with China? Should we have done something about Tibet much earlier? Was that a mistake? So I'm sure those are all some of the themes that will come up. So let me just ask you, each of you, your take. Overall, when you look at India's history, have we made more mistakes than we've done things right? And if so, what are some of the big mistakes that we've made? Why don't I start off with you?
I think given the capabilities and capacities at our disposal, I would argue that India has been able to play a role in international affairs commensurate with its standing. I mean, we kind of have an exaggerated notion of ourselves, but the fact is that for a large part of the last 60 years, we were a poor developing country with very few friends. I mean, we imagined friendships. I was one of those who thought that all these non-aligned movement, etc., these were all imagined friendships, because there was a period when we thought that foreign policy is based on global principles. And then slowly we caught up with the idea that foreign policy for most countries is based on national interest. And I think we were slow in recognizing that. But I think at some
Too much
point,
idealism you feel at some point.
initially yes, but don't forget it came out of the national movement. The national movement was driven by idealism, but there was excessive idealism initially, because of which we had an exaggerated notion of our role in the world. And as we made mistakes, and many of them have been enumerated by Mr. Jaswant Singh in his book, I think we took stock. I think the real turning point in my view was 1990. The moment the Soviet Union collapsed, at that time we re-examined a lot of our presuppositions and relationships. And I think after 91, successive governments have adopted, I would argue, pragmatic positions.
Okay, and so idealism giving way to pragmatism, and that's the right step to go. Mr. Raja.
I don't think the India's foreign policy was always wrong. After all, foreign policy is the extension of our domestic policy. When we started our journey as an independent nation, we didn't have enough friends, and that was the time we were looking for friends, and the Soviet Union, the other socialist countries came to our help. In fact, they helped us to build our basic economic structure. The entire public sector was built with the help given by Soviet Union and other socialist countries. And India also marched ahead as a welfare state. Since 1990s, what we witness, India is transforming itself into a neoliberal state. There comes the problems.